course these dice don't want to roll for me. Why do I even play this game anyway? Guess what? You just got tilted. So what do we do about it now? My name is Tanya, otherwise known as the War Mistress. I've painted some minis, I've played some games, and I'm on a mission to be nice and roll dice. Welcome to another episode of Be Nice and Roll Dice, and I'm here today with Skari, the Archon himself.
Hello, everyone.
How are you doing, Skari?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you,
Yeah.
Tanya. I hope you're doing well. I'm excited. I'm sitting here drinking a nice cup of green tea with some honey in it, and feeling fantastic.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, I thought who better to talk about this topic with me than my coach? Because we're going to talk about what it means to be tilted at the table. And this is more of like an attitude kind of episode. I think it kind of piggybacks kind of well with the last episode that I did with Val. So yeah, and just so that I could like sort of preface this to the audience, you are my 40K coach, but in general, I'm trying to build a better attitude at the table in a variety of different ways, and getting tilted is one of the things that I would like to work on. So,
And I think I'm not the only person out there that, would say not necessarily that you lose your temper at the table, but you let emotion sort of like dictate like your results at the table a lot of the time, or it sort of clouds your judgment when you need to have a clear head to like make decisions.
yeah, I don't think it's not an angry kind of thing. Like, it's definitely not losing my temper, but it is. I guess let's start out by defining what exactly it means to get tilted at the table,
Yep.
because maybe there's some newer players who might not know what we're talking about when we say tilted. So what does it mean to you?
So, you know, in the broader spectrums, getting tilted is being in a position in Warhammer 40,000 or in any game, right? You could think game, like tabletop game, board game, card game, like any sort of situation that you're in where something happens that is out of your control or something rubs you the wrong way, or you have a situation that you're in. It could be a social situation, it could be like a dice situation, it could be a conflict resolution situation, it could be a judge ruling, it could be something along those lines that leaves you not centered. So that's why we say tilted. So it essentially activates the part of your lizard brain, and when you get tilted, you do one of three things normally. So you'll sort of like act instinctively, and you'll either kick into your fight, flight, or your freeze response. And that's when you literally do those things on the table. You either become really indecisive, you get like aggressive, like with your gameplay, or you start taking unnecessary risks, or you sort of like try and get secluded and like stop scoring points and playing the game and just try to conserve like your pieces or whatever. And when that happens, you stop looking at the game objectively and you start looking at the game emotionally. And when that happens, we say tilted. And it's hard to make decisions in the game when you've reached that state.
I think that when I get tilted, I definitely get the fight um, kind of reaction, but it's not like an angry kind of thing. It's more of like a reckless kind of thing, right? Like, I feel like, oh, like this situation is hopeless and there's no way that I can come back from this. So instead of playing tactically, I just sort of like, I look at it like, well, let's just get it over with as soon as possible, right? And I start doing like really risky things. Um, and I think like in my head, it's because I've lost the game, so I just want it to be done. But I imagine that even in the fight sort of instinct, it'll look different for different people. Um,
100%.
yeah.
Being an emotional state, that's the thing about getting tilted. Every single person that becomes tilted at some point, I've become tilted in games, right? Like and you're probably watching or listening, going, yeah, that's been me. Like I've felt that emotional sort of like visceral reaction to a game, right? And you've either gotten annoyed, or you've gotten frustrated, or you felt angry, or you felt anxious, or overwhelmed, right? And there's lots of different ways that people react to stress, right? And it's about getting put under a stressful situation or in a position where you didn't expect to, and then your body reacts differently depending on who you are. That's why it makes it so hard to sort of categorize getting tilted other than in general terms. And B, it's a lot harder even to give people strategies to say bring themselves back from a position where they've kind of gone into that emotional state.
Yeah, so for me, you've given me specific tips that have helped. And for me, progress is definitely not linear. It's not just like I'm on the path, right? So some games are amazing and I don't ever like feel that sort of tilted emotional response. But then sometimes like the last game that I played against my husband, I almost immediately got tilted. Like he got first turn and killed my manticore, because that's always what happens first turn. And like immediately I got tilted, and at first I was like, oh no, like I've done it again. But you've given me some tips that even though I was like in that tilted emotional state, I was able to like sort of take a step back. And my husband's really good, so he'll start talking me through this, and be like, hey, you're like doing that thing again. Um
Well,
and
it's
all of
because you
that.
get it, give off these verbal, it's either verbal or physical, or like you give up like cues, like somebody can read your body language, right?
Mhm.
Especially, and it's one of the things now with COVID and a lot of people playing the game online on TTS or things like that. A lot of the times, that social interaction or that social contract doesn't really work the same way, right? Because it's all of like a vocal thing. It's not really like a physical presence thing where you're physically standing in front of the other table. And me as a player, if I can see someone is like physically getting frustrated at like how they're rolling or things like that, like you can as a bystander sort of like adapt your behavior to make sure that they're a little bit more comfortable if you want them to sort of like have a funner game or things like that as well. But you as well, if you're not standing up and playing, which in this case it sounds like you were, and have somebody kind of catch you, it can be hard, especially if you're sitting in a chair and then you get tilted.
Mhm.
How do you get out of that state when you're literally sitting down with like your hand on a keyboard and a mouse,
Yeah.
right? But yes, there are strategies that you can use, like generalized. But I'm curious to hear how it is that you sort of brought yourself back.
Mhm. Well, before we get into that, I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about maybe the kinds of things. You did mention that you've been tilted before, so I thought maybe we could talk about the kind of things that sort of trigger us to go into that emotional kind of state. Is there any like one thing or a few things for you that sort of trigger that?
Right, absolutely. So I think one of the and I'm going to generalize it a lot here for all of you out there. I think one of the main things that leads to getting tilted in the game is not matching or the what's happening on the tabletop or on the game or whatever you're doing at that moment, not matching your expectation. So I think a lot of getting tilted is about managing your personal expectations as to what could or should happen versus what is realistically going to happen. But then also being able to have like a part of your brain that can deal with, or having like a thing where you can deal with the unknown, because a lot of times when that crazy factor happens, that tends to tilt most people. I need to make this 2-inch charge, and I rolled, or a 3-inch charge, I rolled a 2, I re-rolled it back into a 2, and then they get tilted, right?
Right.
Or like I've got these 10 meltagun shots and I should kill this one wounded raider, and then they don't kill it, right?
Yeah.
They get tilted, right? So it can be a combination of different things, but a lot of the times it's about that level of expectation not meeting what was average or supposed to happen, right? and that can lead to people kind of spiraling into this like state where now they just get emotionally frustrated. Why am I even rolling dice? Doesn't even matter anymore, right? You know what I mean? Like everything I roll is a 1, right? Right? And so it becomes this sort of like self-fulfilling prophecy,
Mhm.
because then as soon as you're tilted, you'll notice every bad roll. It doesn't matter if you have like good rolls somewhere or whatever. Like all you'll do is focus on like the most negative stuff. Like, see, I rolled another failed save. Yeah, but you passed like 5 in a row, like 1 save ago, right?
Yeah.
But and so you sort of like gravitate to that negative think tank, right? And
Yeah.
that emotional state, that visceral, like, you know, just like clawing at everything, and like that survival mode kicks in. And then it could be something like as simple as you go up to a tournament and you stand in front of a person and they haven't showered, and like they literally have like BO smell, right?
Why does
And
it always
you're
come
like,
down to this
ah,
when you're
I
on
have
the
to.
show?
Is that, did we talk about this last time too?
Yes.
I
Yes.
don't remember. But what I'm saying, oh right, we did. We talked about like running a tournament.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, I remember. And like your tournament kit. And I said have like deodorant in your tournament kit, right? But
Yes.
like, that could tilt you. You know what I mean? Like if you're that kind of person that's like, oh, I don't want to, you know what I mean? Like that could lead to your emotional state getting affected and affecting like your game, right? And so that's, I guess now with masks, a lot of people, the breath doesn't really matter too much because then you're just, but that could also be something back in the day too.
Okay. So I know, so for me, I'm gonna like get a little bit vulnerable here because I know exactly why I get tilted. And for a while it was happening in almost every single game. Like I'd say probably like a year ago or so. It was happening in almost every single game, and I've really, really been working on it, but I know like exactly why I get tilted. Um and for me, it's because I have this giant chip on my shoulder where I feel like I have to perform above and
Yep.
beyond what
Mhm.
other hobbyists get to just comfortably be, because I am a woman and therefore I am expected to lose. So when something doesn't go as planned on the table, I immediately feel like everybody is going to say, see, women can't play this game because that is what people
Right.
told me. um Whether or not, like, obviously it's not true, but that is like the
But you
part of
roll
my
dice
brain that
differently than we
is
do, right? Like it just
obviously
comes out of your hand differently,
right. our,
so
our
it has to be
tiny
different.
little feminine hands, they just can't fit as many dice in them, so
You don't really
therefore not
believe
as
that, internet?
powerful.
Please don't crucify me. That's me making what's called a joke.
No, you are one of like my biggest supporters, so obviously you don't think that.
Um, I totally understand, but that's like that
Yeah,
expectation, right? And then
right.
having like that sort of like you putting that pressure on yourself, it seems,
Yes.
right?
Also, I play a
And
faction that's really hard to play.
not easy.
No.
But or you marry all that together, you put it all
Yeah.
together, and you have like a situation that's sort of ripe for like that emotional state to kick in.
Hmm.
And it happens in professional sports too. Like it's not just, you know, you can tell when your favorite sports player, Bob the Builder, who's a great like, slugger at the bat, right? Because he builds home runs. Anyway, so he goes in and he normally has like great batting average, whatever, or a hockey player or a basketball player. Normally their numbers, and they'll have their off games where you can just tell when the camera is like zoomed in on them that they're like frustrated, like visibly, like you can tell in their face that they're just like not happy with today. And that happens to like most people, and the key to like managing your emotions at the table, in my opinion. And by the way, if any of you have like any like, you know, like Covetton House style like remedies for this, please leave a comment down below
You
and say, this
full-time
is what I
content
do.
creator, you.
I said That's Colbert. We can do some Colbert stuff in there, right?
Okay.
But you can literally put it down below and be like, hey, this is like what I do to like reset myself. And I'm very curious to see what your strategy is at the table to
Mine?
like manage your emotions. The watchers, the people who are watching the show
Okay.
right now, that are watching the video. Like if you have like this homeopathic super remedy that works, right, or whatever, you know, put a comment down below because every single person manages their emotions differently. Now, it's not about catching. It's not about like not feeling emotion, especially when you're playing a game. Like we're human. You can't just go to a game and like expect to just have zero emotion, unless you're Devin Swan, in which case you're a robot. Love you, Devin. But, however, I've seen him crack too, like get like frustrated when dice rolls aren't going his way or whatever, which happens to all of us. It's about catching yourself and being conscious about it before it goes too far or just before you tip that point of like no return, if that makes sense. And because it's an emotional thing we're talking about, it's so like fleeting and esoteric. Like that you can't really like it's not tangible in that way. You can't just grab it like a measuring tape. Like it's not that physical thing. It's a totally emotional thing, and that's what makes it so hard, right? To like manage and to notice and to be conscious of, unless you have like a crazy good emotional like intelligence. And some people have incredible emotional intelligence where they just like look at someone and go, that person is angry, and then that other person goes, oh, that's enraged. Like just like totally different like emotional states, but that
Yeah.
can kind of be the same sometimes, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. But I do think that even if you maybe struggle with emotional intelligence, especially like within yourself, I do think that there are steps that you can take um to learn to recognize when it's happening.
Yeah.
And for me, I've been working on it for like over a year, and I can see now that I'm like getting better at it, but it is like a constant thing that I'm working on. Um, so I guess like we could share some tips and tricks. Do you want me to go
Yeah,
first?
completely up to you.
Okay.
We can do one and one if you want.
Sure.
You
I
know,
like that.
there you go.
All right.
I like that. Since I'm your guest, I'll go first. Thank you. Um,
By all means.
Thank you. You're so kind. Um, so I now like talking now. To be honest, there's different ways that I deal with emotional stuff in a game, and like one of the biggest things that helps me manage my emotions in the game is to understand what the goal of the game that I'm playing is at that moment. Being like creating content full time means that sometimes I have to film battle reports, right? And a lot of the times the battle report is more geared to entertain rather than to teach, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Although I try and marry the two a lot. I try and do a lot of teaching while entertaining and explaining like what I'm doing. However, when I go to like a tournament, the aim of the game is to get more points than my opponent. Like I'm always going to do that in a very friendly and open, and like I'm going to play the game as I hope and I wish my opponent will play with me, which is always fun and friendly. And I'm very like I crack jokes and all that stuff. And some people find that like a little bit emotionally like I'm a little bit too much, right? But
You know.
that's kind of like what yo, you've played me. You know.
You're
You've
not too
you've seen
much.
how like
You're not
whack
extra.
I'm I'm like over the top, okay? If Vex had anything to say with me, he'd be like, "Get that flamboyant Archon and just like throw him in a pit somewhere. Let's see how happy he is after that." Um,
No, you're a
so
joy to play.
at the tournament, thank you, appreciate it. I am amazing. So no, wait, my ego just left. Okay,
Okay.
we're back. So when I'm at a tournament, for example, I play with a chess clock, right? In all seriousness. And so I and I highly recommend that if you I like it because I get, you split the time 50-50, but I don't use all my time a lot of the time. So sometimes, when the time comes, I can put the time on myself and like take time to chill the F out. Like if I'm having like a really tense part of the game or it's down to the wire and things are like, a lot of the times I need to like step back from the game, take a deep breath and like see what's happening and take 2 to 3 minutes or 4 minutes to like process what's going on. Because the worst thing I can do when I'm in an emotional state is, or when it's getting to that point where it's like I'm only a few points either like above or behind, we're like getting to that turn 4 to 5, it's like getting down to the wire. The worst thing you can do is just let yourself get emotional because then it'll like something will happen and it'll like your whole everything you kind of the house of cards will kind of fall down on its head. So I like having control of my time to give myself time to say, I need a break. I need like I'll put it on my time. I need to go to the bathroom, drink a drink a cup of water. Like I've splashed water on my face. Literally sit down for like 2 minutes, sort of like almost Zen meditate, and it's all on my time. So it has nothing to do with my opponent. Like they can just be patient, and I'm like I just need this time to like get Zen or whatever. And that's what I do in like competitive games. When it comes to friendly games, it's a friendly game. So it's more about making sure my opponent is having fun. So my emotional state is constantly like measuring, like, are they having fun? And if they're like not having as much fun as I hope that they would, I'll do something silly, and like try get them to have more fun, basically. So
Yeah.
that tends to happen a lot. That's my first tip. There you go.
All
How
right.
about that? That was a long-winded
It was
one.
a bit long-winded. Um, my tip is a tip that I have for almost everything, and that is to build yourself a support network. And the support network is going to be friends who also play the game, who you can be vulnerable with and explain to them, this is my problem. This is what I want to work on. And in order for me to work on it, I need you to point it out when it happens. Because sometimes people, like, it just becomes an elephant in the room and
Yeah.
nobody wants to talk about it and nobody wants to point it out. And that's not going to help you, honestly. So
Mm.
if it's something that you really, really do want to get over, I would just say search out the people in your like local wargaming community who you can be vulnerable with and get them
Yeah.
on board to be your cheerleaders.
Yeah.
Um,
And you kind of sometimes need, like, depending on the person, you'll need like different types of emotional support. Like you could literally have someone in your back pocket. It's like if you're having a hard time at a tournament or a game, you could send them a quick message and be like, "Hey, I'm really frustrated right now with the dice," and then they could be like, you know, "Get good scrub," and give you some like tough love, or they could be like, work you through like your emotional state, right? So depending on what type of person you are that needs what type of feedback, you could always kind of do that. I would assume.
I'm a tough love person. I need the tough love.
Good, good script.
Yeah.
Okay, so second, but that's like very true. Like you don't have to go through this sort of like emotional game state by yourself. Like you don't have to. Like it can feel very isolationist when you're even when you're at a tournament with like 200 people, right? Like a big tournament. Like the voices are really loud. There's this constant droning going on in your head of just the amount of people that are just like yap 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 yap, and it can be very like it can be a total sensory overload, right? And a lot of us, at least in this generation, have like sensitivity to like you know lights and sounds and all this stuff, and we're constantly on like a heightened sense of you know stress levels, right? Like our hormones and stuff are like all up here, and that can at some point kind of flip, but it can then at the same time feel very like overwhelming, and you can feel very alone in a moment like that. And I think in that position, another thing that I use a lot to sort of like I use humor a lot to get myself back on track. You know what I mean? And I like laugh a lot at like terrible situations that happen, and I tend to laugh at myself a lot. Like, I failed a charge, or my first Shadowfield save fails, and my Archon dies terribly, or whatever. I'll try and make light of it with like humor, and I think humor is a good response for me because it helps me separate the fact that we're playing a game with that emotional state and allows me to laugh and not take it too seriously in that moment, so I don't go down that path too far of getting tilted.
Mm-hmm. You're working with me on my self-talk as well, which is actually it's really helping, because as soon as I would get tilted, I would go into this like sort of cycle of like internally negative self-talk of like
Yeah.
all of those people who said mean things to me when I was first starting out in this hobby. It's like all of their voices come back into my head, but it's my voice. Um, and I have noticed when other people get tilted with me when I'm having a game with them, that sometimes they let out some like verbal cues that make me think maybe they also are having this negative self-talk. Um, so do you have any tips for us to like turn that off, turn it around?
Well, self-talk, like in terms of self-talk, that's like a whole like topic on, yes, self-esteem and like how you see yourself and sort of like that expectation of yourself, right? And like what you expect yourself to do comes into this a lot. And self-talk and the talk that you have with an opponent at the table, being conscious of what is being physically said or thought can have a huge impact on your emotional state. And we're talking like, you know, um, secret stuff here, right? Like, like in the like, go read The Secret, and everything you say will like manifest or whatever. That I can't tell you how true that is emotionally. Um, well, I can tell you. I'm telling you right now. Yeah.
Yes, we're telling you.
So, and it's something that as a coach, as a gaming coach, like I'm not just teaching you how to play the game, but in your case, for example, we've been working a lot on that self-talk and how something as simple as changing the mentality from, you know, oh, I was terrible that game and I lost that game terribly, right? Like that's just like a self depreciation statement that you're saying I suck, therefore I lose, right? Where you can have a tough game, you can have a tough situation or a tough opponent and change the wording to give yourself room to improve emotionally, right? So you go, that was a tough game. I have learned this from it, and I can't wait to apply what I've learned next game, right? Instead of like literally bringing yourself down, you're sort of acknowledging that the game was terrible, right? And that you just felt bad or that you had a hard time, but you're not like it's not the pressure shouldn't be on your shoulders, isn't like you're a bad gamer or you're a bad person. It becomes more of a this was a tough matchup for me. This was a tough or a hard learning experience. However, it is learning. And being able to then take what you learn and apply it next time helps you in that emotional state so that when it comes down to that like, oh, rats, I didn't charge with the unit I wanted to charge, and then your opponent's like, no, you can't take that back. Or you go, I needed to activate this charging unit first to prevent this unit from interrupting and murdering me, and you're like, no, I'm such an idiot, right? Instead of doing that, being like, that was a mistake and a one that I'm going to learn from. Because we play many games, or as many as we can play. There's no point in like, hinging your emotional wellness on like a single moment in a single game. If
Hmm.
that makes sense. Like you learn from that and you move on. You have to sort of compartmentalize it. That's not easy though.
It's not
Not
easy.
easy. We're talking about emotions here. And I've been called a chronic optimist. But that's also because, yes, do I suffer from anxiety, depression at times? Absolutely, I do. Like the last couple of days, like even you, Tanya, I sent you a message. I'm like, I'm not feeling the greatest. Um, but it's about building those strategies in life even that kind of help you come back to a position where you're like, you know what, today I felt great. I worked out and I did this and I feel a lot more like myself again.
Hmm.
And I'm sure a lot of you viewers out there have been through something like this, or someone that has gone through or is going or has gone through stuff like this.
Hmm.
So I feel like it's a topic you can relate to very much to as well.
Yeah, so something that's also helped me sort of get past getting tilted at the table, and this is a long-term strategy. Like almost all of my strategies are long-term. There's no like one band-aid that you're going to be able to like throw on this situation and you're like, immediately I'm better, I'm never going to get tilted again. Like, no, you will. It's just like human nature, it's going to happen. So this long-term strategy that I have is to journal my gaming experiences, and I am allowed to put all of like my negative emotions that I felt at the table, I'm allowed to put that into the journal, but I have to end every journal entry with something positive.
Yeah.
Something that I did in the game, even if it was something bad that I did, but I could like pinpoint that that was not the greatest decision. Like whatever, I'm allowed to communicate all of my feelings into the diary, but I have to flip it positive in some way. And that just sort of
Mhm.
like resets your brain into thinking a different way. I don't know what it is, but for some people, it may be hard to express emotions because that's what getting tilted is, right? It's like over emotionality. Some people have a hard time expressing that, like in spoken words. So you could definitely try journaling. It helped me immensely. I journaled like intensely for like the first 6 months that I started
I,
gaming.
I I gave you like crap when you didn't put your journal stuff
It's
in.
true.
Like I was
It's
like your
true.
accountability buddy,
You
which is
were.
another thing. Like you need to have like some sort of like somebody to keep you accountable if you really want to change. And it's about creating better habits, like at an emotional level, right? And I love how we've been talking about tilting. Now we're talking about like emotional healthness. I don't even know if that's a word,
Well-being.
but yeah, there we go. Emotional. We're talking about emotional well-being and
Yeah.
how that and to kind of piggyback off like a little bit of like the cheating conversation, which is something that you and Val had a couple of like conversations on. A lot of the times, that sort of feeling like you need to cheat in a game comes from a sense of like that like depreciation or self-worth that you're struggling with, and so you feel like cheating is like the way that you can get around feeling bad when things go bad, if that makes sense. um so sometimes it has to do with that as well. Anyway, but yeah, that's a whole other topic. I'll just sprinkle it in there. Just,
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Be nice, roll dice, don't cheat. I'm going to change the name of this podcast.
Be nice, roll dice, don't cheat, and make sure you take a chill pill.
Just write in your journal every once in a while. I promise it
Yeah, right,
works.
right in your journal. Yeah, yeah, no, it
Uh,
does. But that's something to remember though. It is a process, right? And on another note of not just self-talk, but then the second part I wanted to talk about was the talking with your opponent part of it. If you listen more than you talk in some situations in the game, you'll notice like verbal things that are like hooks that can lead you down like negative think spirals, especially when it's about dice rolling. And this is something that, for example, Matt Alfarius and myself, like we've like that's something that we really talked about a lot about a year ago, and it's something that I'm quite conscious about. It's like when you're rolling dice and you have a terrible roll, the self-talk that you're going to do to yourself is, oh, that roll was terrible, right? Like if you're not being conscious of your self-talk, you like physically notice that out of 10 dice, you rolled 8 misses or something like that. And you're like, right?
Yeah.
I hit on 2s. How is this physically possible, right? However, there's a second part of that where your opponent sort of pinpoints all those bad rolls, and they're like, "Ooh, that was a terrible roll. Ooh, I'm so sorry that you rolled so shitty." You know what I mean? Oh man, so that's terrible, right? And they do it out of the goodness of their heart, right?
Yeah.
It's not like a bad thing. They're physically trying to have that sympathy, that empathy for you, trying to get you to, but at the same time, it can have like an adverse effect where it gets you to notice all the terrible rolls you're having, and it becomes conscious and present in your mind. So then
Hmm.
every time you roll shitty, you tend to notice it more. So what I try to do is when somebody rolls terrible, I try to not say anything. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to just positively reinforce when somebody rolls well. You're like,
Hmm.
"Oh, that was a great roll."
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? Like, and just kinda give it like that positive spin, right? In that sense. So they start noticing the positive things that are going on. And then it sort of tends to the air of the game changes, which I
Hmm.
think is very important.
Bad dice rolls used to really get to me. Like they used to be the thing that would like start off my tilt. Um
Mhm.
but I started like when I started rolling badly, like on pivotal rolls or anything like that, I would just tell myself like, you know what, like that's out of your control because it's a dice game. So it might mean that you have to, be more spot on with your movement phase next turn or whatever, but that's next turn's problem, right? We're going to do what we can do right now outside of the dice, and yeah, we'll deal with next turn when it comes up. And that's sort of like helping me forget about the dice in a way, if
Mhm.
that makes sense. But yeah.
100%. It's that is that compartmentalization, right? Like you have to every single, and this really helps me, like if we're looking at strategies, it's compartmentalizing each dice roll. The fact that I rolled below average or above average in a single dice roll has no bearing on whether I'm going to roll above or below average in the next dice roll. So like every single roll of the dice is like its own isolated incident. And the worst thing you can do is sort of like let that emotional state bleed through. Like you could be like, yes, I rolled really well. That means I'm going to roll really well to wound. It's not necessarily the case, right? Like you can hit really well and then not roll any hits, right?
That's
Or
usually my
wound
thing.
not at all and then roll really well to wound. You know what I mean? So I don't like I stopped counting the dice. I'm not saying roll more dice than you should, okay? Not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if I have my venom that shoots 10 shots or whatever, not anymore actually, that was an old rule for venoms. So now it would be or 7 shots, okay? So say my venom goes up to you and shoots 7 shots at close range. Um and I roll 2 hits. I hit on 3s, right? That's not average, right? It should have been 3 or 4, right? 4 or 5, sorry. Um, However, I'm not going to go up and go, oh, I missed 5 times. That's not what I'm saying. I'll pick up the 2 and I'll immediately roll them to wound and then just tell my opponent, this is how many saves you have to make. Sometimes they'll be like, sometimes those 2 that hit will be the 2 that wound, which then statistically speaking is about the same as if I would have rolled my 4 hits with wounding on 4s with my poison. So, like, I don't give the power to that individual roll to rule my emotional state, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. Yeah.
Hmm. I've like pretty much narrowed it down that the thing that sets me off getting tilted is losing a tank very first turn before I get to shoot it. I just want to shoot my tank once.
I believe you were talking um, with Maya, weren't you, the other day? Was it with then and you told Maya not to deploy her exorcist out in the open or something like that, and you were like, you can move and shoot it, right? Or so, like
That
you
was
would,
private conversation.
I'm just saying, I just had that conversation with her today. Anyway, so um, so it's just a matter of like hiding your tank better, Tanya.
Tanya, get good, scrub.
Get good, scrub.
I will have you know that my success is like entirely dependent on your ability to coach me now. So you're
Well, that's pressure. Why are you putting so much pressure on me? You
because
know?
that's how I roll.
That's right. I feel. Wait, where's my ego? I need my ego. Where'd he go?
He's not far
I
away, I'm
can do
sure.
it. I'm the best person for the job.
Okay, so we've got some coping strategies. If you're a person on the other side of the table and somebody is getting tilted, what should we do?
That's a great question.
I feel like you can gently point it out.
Well, that's true. You can definitely be like, hey,
How you
do you need
feeling?
to do you need to take how you feeling, bruh? Um, no, no. Sometimes I'll be like, do you need like a break or anything, man? Like, you know, like, do you need like a break? Like, is everything good? Like, you seem a little frustrated. And sometimes be like, yeah, I'm fucking frustrated. I just rolled 51s in a row or something like that, right? And sometimes people know that they get tilted. And they just know that this is how I get when I get tilted. So just being like nudging them, being like, like, do you need a break? You know what I mean? Like, it's okay. We can take a break if you need. And then sometimes they'll be like, no, right? Because that's the fight response. They just
Yeah.
want to get stuck in, right?
Yeah.
But you can always take a break. Be like, what, can I go get you a glass of water or something, or a bottle of water? Like offer them like a beverage.
That's a great
Be
idea, actually.
like a Sheldon thing, or you can,
Nice.
um, yeah, you go, yeah, um, or you can just point and laugh. You know,
No!
no, no,
Scotty!
don't do that. Don't do that. I'm I'm kidding,
You
okay? I'm a
better
nice
be.
person.
You are a nice
You
person, but
know,
jeez.
can you tell I'm having a great time talking about this? So now do not like poke the bear, okay? Just don't do that. That's just a recipe for disaster. No, I'm just like be human, if that makes sense. Like try and some people don't want help. Like some people are very much like, I'm gonna deal with this by myself. I mean, like, don't point out that I'm being moody, you know? Okay, fine. Like I'm gonna just take a break or sit down. Just, you know. But the biggest thing is you have to be in control of your emotional state. Because I found, for example, when a person does get tilted, they can sometimes get into that fight response where it's not like they want to fight you, but they get like they, the pace of the game kind of like rises. And I don't know if any of you out there have ever felt this before, but they start rushing things a lot. And a lot of the times, like they rush and they kind of bring you into that rushing stage where you find yourself sort of rolling dice really fast and picking up models and not really understanding what's going on because you've sort of like gotten sucked in to their emotional state, if that makes sense. So I think one of the biggest things you can do is kind of make sure that you like empathize with them. I mean, like understand how it feels, but don't like feel the same way, if that makes sense. You have to like
Hmm.
separate yourself from the situation and understand that you're not making them feel like shit, right? They are rolling. They got frustrated. You have no, because at the same time, you have no idea what like their personal life is like, or if they're having issues at home, or like their mortgage bounced, or like they're having like financial trouble, or like love life trouble, or whatever it is. Like you can't like judge them for feeling frustrated, but you can control what right? And
Hmm.
sometimes it's just taking that step back, even from that situation, and be like, I notice my opponent's tilted, but I can't let their tiltingness tilt me. I think
Yeah.
that's one of the most important parts. Somebody at the table needs to have like a clear head, right? And I'm not this. I'm sounding like it's like crisis management here, like a group home or something. But like you just need to like make sure you take like a step back and be there for them if they need it. Offer them like a drink or something. You need to take a break. Like, do you need to go for a smoke? Like, some people are like antsy because they smoke and they haven't been able to have a smoke in fucking 6 hours. Pardon my language, right? And
Yeah.
uh, and they're like, I just haven't had a smoke in like 6 hours because we've done 3 rounds back to back. And you're like, dude, go have a smoke. You know what I mean? Like go. Like it's good. Like you can go and come back in 2 minutes. And sometimes that's all it takes to like reset someone,
Hmm.
to like, just take a break, right?
Yeah.
Mm,
I would say definitely like don't take it personally as well. Um,
yeah.
but I also know that when I'm tilted, the last thing that I need is like cheeky table banter.
Yeah. Mm,
That is a good way to make it so I'll never get out of that emotional state is if you keep
mhm,
poking the bear.
right.
I had one opponent who and you know what? I knew going into it that there was a good chance that I was going to get tilted because I was coming off like a string of bad losses and all of that. And it was just
Mhm,
like I had never played this person before in my life. And my general rule of thumb with banter is like I don't banter unless I know who you are, right? So I had
right.
never played with this person before, and it was just like cheeky poke after cheeky poke after cheeky poke after I was already tilted, and then there was no saving it at that point.
Yeah.
So like I would say keep the table banter to a minimum. Um, and maybe try to support them if they seem like the kind of person who
Right.
needs to be like talked with, you know.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, what like the game itself, sometimes you're already anxious going to like playing a game or meeting somebody at the game shop because you're either like, you like you're introspective and you don't really like the social interaction or whatever. Like that can be really tough when you're like at the table and you're like you're a person who enjoys their personal space, or that personal time, and you're there to just roll some dice and play with little toy soldiers, and then your opponent's like totally tilted, and you're like, right now, don't forget though, like you have friends at the event, right? Like, or at the table or at the game store. Like, you should like. I highly recommend that you get to know like the owners and the store owners and stuff like that because you can have people in your corner. Like we said, like having somebody on your phone. It's like, hey, my opponent is getting like really frustrated right now because can only roll sixes and they're rolling like shit, like or whatever it is. But you can't take it personally. You can do that, or like you can kind of give the store owner a look, be like this guy's going off the rails or whatever, and then a lot of the times a judge or a ref or like the person next to you, like the next table over or whatever, can kind of just have that interaction with you to give you some like backup, not necessarily going in and be like, hey dude, simmer down, right? Unless they're getting like you know, crazy emotional, in which case, like, then there's an issue, and then, that's a problem. But I mean, like, just having somebody that's in that situation with you, to be like, I got your back, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
don't poke the bear, though.
Don't poke the bear.
Definitely don't point to them and go, ha ha,
No,
like Nelson.
no, don't like just keep the cheeky comments to
Yeah,
yourself.
no, that was a terrible example. I said that in like totally joking, okay? Somebody's gonna, like, literally, like, film at a GT or something, be like, "I'm gonna do what Skari told me to do. Ha ha!" And then get punched in the face. I do not condone that action. I'm telling that on camera. You can clip it, share it with the world.
Yeah. So I think that that's all that I have. Did you have anything that you wanted to leave the listeners with?
Don't be afraid to reach out to someone. Like, if you have any questions, especially, because we are not perfect. We put on a face here in YouTube, right? Or on Instagram or whatever. And, we're not perfect. We're human. We suffer from like cry. We get angry. We get frustrated. We get anxious. Like we are human. Do not forget that. So it's okay to reach out and be like, this is an issue I'm having. How would, help me like with something or whatever. We can't solve your problems, but we can give you what has worked for us. So don't be afraid to talk about it with someone if it's something that you feel is something you'd like to work on, right? And that's really it. If that's something that you feel that you want to work on or that you feel like would help in the future or presently or over time, and you want to do something about it, then there's people out there who are willing to like listen to you and help you out and stuff like that. So don't feel like you're alone in it, right? It could go to anything from getting tilted at the table because of dice rolls and then getting frustrated to, just in general. You know what I mean? Like the fact that we've been in lockdown in most of the world for almost a year and a half, right? Or, and coming on a year and a half in some places. That's not easy emotionally, right? So reach out to somebody if you need to. You're not alone out there.
Mm-hmm. I think that that's a great place to end it. Thank you so much for being on the show, Skari.
Thank you for having me, Tanya, the War Mistress Gates. I'll make sure I catch your show on Twitch at 2 a.m.
Somewhere. It's
somewhere.
2 a.m. somewhere. Bye, everybody.
Wednesdays and Saturdays.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. So, in the comments down below, I would like you to tell me about a time where you got tilted at the table. Don't be afraid to be a little bit vulnerable here. Were you able to get yourself together and come back to the table, or did you have to take a break entirely? Let's share our stories. Don't forget that I am a co-host on Forge the Narrative podcast. I stream twice a week to Twitch. I do daily updates to Instagram, and I occasionally write articles for Goonhammer. So catch me in all of those places. And until next time, everybody, be nice and roll dice.